Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Abington School Committee meeting. Tonight is Tuesday, August 4th at 7 p.m. Tonight, we're not going to be answering any questions. We've had two meetings, a few hours of questions, and so we're just going to get right into it. Any questions that I've received, I've sent them to Peter, and he's done a great job answering them. So from here, we're going to, we have a special guest. We have from the Abington Education Association, we have the president, Steve Shannon, that would like to say a few words. Steve, whenever you're ready.
He's on mute.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Steve Shannon. I'm the president of the Abington Education Association, and I've taught all of my 32 years in Abington. I'd like to thank the committee for allowing me the opportunity to speak before you take your final vote on what I'm sure is one of the most important and difficult decisions this committee will ever have to make. As Ms. Abrams referenced last week, you will have to decide what is the best worst option. And I am very appreciative of the fact that you are considering the voices of educators as a part of that decision-making process. I appreciated the candor last week of Ms. Abrams speaking not just in her primary role as a parent, but also as a teacher. Trust me when I say that every educator I have spoken with has had the exact same internal struggle and dialogue with their family, friends, and colleagues. We've all lost sleep over this. We all want to be back with our students. It's how we do what we do best. The value and importance of in-person teaching and learning is not lost on the members of the Abington Education Association. To think otherwise would be a complete and total misunderstanding of what it means to be a teacher. Let me reiterate. Faculty and staff want to be back in the classrooms and buildings with their students, but it is simply not safe enough at this time to entertain anything less than a remote start to the year. I know many would disagree with some or all of that last statement, but we do miss our state students terribly. None of this has been easy on anyone. As Ms. Happel said last week, so much has been lost. Many of our staff have school-aged children and experienced firsthand the same difficulties of balancing the challenges of working from home and meeting the needs of their families. I struggled with whether to address the growing backlash against teachers that has surfaced in the past week or so. We have suddenly gone from hero to zero. But what do I say to people who have already made up their minds about how they think things are going to be? Or those who think that teachers shouldn't be paid for teaching from home? What can I say to those who compare teaching to other jobs that have far stricter protections and capacity limits in their workplaces with far fewer interactions with others for significantly shorter periods of time? There are those who have said that teachers are refusing to teach. This is simply untrue. No one is refusing to teach. Last week, a comment was read from a community member about teachers needing to adapt. We do adapt. We adapt every day of every year to accommodate the ever-growing demands of our job. We certainly adapted when active shooter drills were added to our list of annual routines. We have had to adapt to the idea that we may have to take a bullet for our students. But teachers did not enter this profession to take those bullets home and expose their families to a highly contagious, unpredictable, and deadly virus. We have a significant population of our staff who are a high-risk category themselves or are living or with or caring for someone who is immunocompromised or high risk. Let's make no mistake, we aren't asking to start remotely because we are lazy and can't adapt. It's certainly not the easy way out. Teaching in person is easier than teaching remotely. We're not advocating to do less or for what the easy option is. We're advocating for the safest. Any in-person model carries with it significant and avoidable risks. I'll say that again, avoidable risks to students, staff, and their families. The past two presentations to the committee clearly show the number of obstacles and hurdles that will greatly interfere with teaching and learning as we know it. The day will be spent enforcing protocols, not educating students, delays in picking up and dropping off, long lines at the bathroom or sanitizing station, walking single file to lunches where they will not be able to sit or interact with their friends. There will be no socialization due to the distancing measures, and there will be little to no learning taking place. All of these things are the antithesis of teaching as we know it. In a report I received directly from the Abington Health Agent, as of July 30th, there have been 250 confirmed cases in Abington. Of those 250, 5% or 12 people were 19 years of age or younger. just 1% lower than the state percentage for the same age group. Recently released peer-reviewed studies are showing increased cases in school-aged children, many of whom carry an increased amount of virus in them, even while asymptomatic. We have read reports of outbreaks in camps and schools in Georgia, and even closer to home in South Weymouth, closures of favorite ice cream places and canceled outdoor graduations in surrounding towns. How long until it reaches us and disrupts our lives even more? If Major League Baseball can't keep its players safe in an outdoor environment, how can we provide that safety in closed quarters 7 hours a day? If rules prevent this meeting from taking place in person, why is it suddenly okay on September 16th to have hundreds of students gather who have had limited exposure to each other since March? Teaching and learning remotely guarantees that schools will not be the source of an outbreak or surge. Would anyone want that on their conscience? The spring was an anomaly. We lost momentum and connection while waiting for the state's guidance. We were collectively reeling from the onset and realities of a growing global pandemic. We have to stop anticipating that the fall will be the same. I've been fortunate to have been part of many conversations at many different tables since early June that have been asking the same question: what do we need to do better? There was consensus that any remote model needs to have clear expectations and accountability for all, and consistency in its delivery. The Abington Education Association is committed to such a model. Through the collective bargaining process and ongoing discussions, we are committed to creating a thoughtful, educationally sound, and safe return to school for all when conditions allow for us to do so. I respectfully ask that you vote for a remote start to the 2021 school year with a phased return to buildings only when it is safe. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for unmuting me. Does anybody have any questions for Steve?
I do, Jay. I do, Wendy.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Steve, first of all, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate you coming on and giving us the perspective of the AA. And I hope you know, I think many of your members that have interacted with me would let you know that I think very highly of the job you're doing and all of your staff is doing. But there are some questions I just want to ask you, maybe clarifications, if nothing else, too. I emailed you this the other day, and I know you got back to me. I had a crazy weekend, so I didn't get a chance to read all, but for the rest of us too, because as of right now, based on the way our votes all went at the last meeting, how we were leaning anyway, and how the superintendent gave his recommendation, the committee and the administration all feel it's safe as of right now. Ms. Abrams indicated full remote, but it was more based on the 81 pages of guidance, if I remember correctly. That was the reason why she felt full remote was the best option. And there may have been others, but I remember that reason being stated. So when you say only when all health and safety benchmarks have been met and COVID numbers are under control, is there a finite definition of what that means?
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for the comments earlier. I think, I had mentioned to you that we submitted a checklist provided by the Mass Teachers Association, which I think, although maybe not entirely comprehensive, certainly I think sets up the myriad of items that need to be checked off before we can even entertain that. I think the other thing is that we take issue with the state guidance of 3 feet or less, 3 feet minimum. We know that accepted guidance globally is 6 feet, and that the guidance that has been put forth is saying that it's okay for 3 feet, and we take strong issue with that, and are and concerned about that. So.
Okay. One I have just so I know full remote is the stance of the AEA. Does that full remote allow for the students in the high needs category, as been defined by Dr. Robbins in previous meetings, to still get that instruction in person in school? This
is what's kept me up at night. To be honest, this is my greatest concern. I know it feels contrary to what our position is, that we recognize certainly our high needs populations, not only our high needs students, but our high needs staff who are teaching those students. So I struggle with this greatly. I don't have an easy answer, but it's something that that we are willing to explore fully at the table.
Okay, that makes sense.
Thank you, Chris.
And I just want to be clear on, I guess my last thing is, I received, as you're aware, I replied back to most of the AEA over the weekend. I received some answer, but most said, and I got your answer. I do just want to clarify though that this may never, ever be gone. We may never have a vaccine. We're all hopeful for that. And I guess I was more looking to make sure that your stance is not until there's a vaccine or until it's gone, because that could be something that we could be here for the rest of our lives doing this. And I guess I think you clarified by not saying that was what that meant, but it was a question I had before you got to tell us. So
That is correct. And like I said, we're not refusing to return to work. I want to be really clear about that, or that there's a vaccine. But I think we're going to see over the next couple weeks and months, we'll have to wait and see what the virus is going to do. That could, as Peter has been saying all along, the virus is going to dictate a lot of this. And I agree with that. So that is not, the vaccine is not a deal breaker.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
No problem. Wendy, I think I'm all set. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shannon.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Okay. I think we're going to move on to Peter, and he has a recommendation.
Can I just
Not for this, but for the school
comment
year.
a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
So I just want to acknowledge at the end of the last school year, Steve, Shannon, Steve Moore, and a team of teachers, both an elementary and a secondary team of teachers, spent a lot of time. AEA and that membership and those teachers really began the discussions about what needs to be done with remote learning. We spent time surveying our families right at the end of remote learning so that we could get the most up-to-date information from them as they experienced it in terms of changes that can be made. Make no mistake, these are all bad options. There is an option that's going to be the least bad. So I do believe that this virus is going to drive this more than any of us. As difficult as that is to swallow, even though it's been driving things since March for our country, if we end up in a fully remote situation, it will be greatly improved compared to what it was. It doesn't mean it's going to be all things to all people and a silver bullet, and it's going to be fantastic. It will be greatly improved. It will be much more what people are looking for. And I just wanted to acknowledge the work of the association with us on that at the end of the last year, and then at other points during the summer, as we've talked about this reentry, the association has been there for those conversations. And then I just like to, if I could, Steve alluded to this. We all know that educators and staff, and they're being prepared for a safe and successful school reopening, is critical. No matter how we reopen, we only get one chance every year to start the school year. And in order to provide sufficient training, the commissioner has reduced the number of days from 180 to 170 in terms of the requirements for schools. We already had 2 days planned. We have 2 days every single year at the beginning of the year. And so what the commissioner has done is reduced the number of days that school systems are required to operate. And what he's stipulated is that districts begin providing instruction to students no later than September 16th. So my request of the school committee is for the committee to amend the calendar to start school on the 16th for those days prior to opening to be spent with teachers while they're back, taking great time and attention to the opening. The exact schedule of those days and the professional development and the self-directed time that would occur is obviously something we'll talk about with the association. But suffice it to say, those days would be used for the preparation of the opening of school.
Peter, is that so does that remain where I think teachers' first data report was August 31st? I could be wrong. Whatever the first day, does that stay the same or does that move with it?
Yes,
It would stay the same?
correct.
Okay.
They would come on the 31st, and then we would open on the 16th.
Okay, and in between those days, they would be working on getting ready for the school year?
Correct.
Okay.
Peter, when you say getting ready for the school year, what does that consist of? Is that, are they going to be doing PD for remote learning, or are they going to be in the classroom setting their classrooms up? Like, what's going to happen?
That depends on how we open. No matter which of the three options occurs, there'll be work to do. There'll be time well spent. And honestly, I don't know if there'll be any school district in Massachusetts that doesn't take advantage of this. I don't.
Peter, regardless of the model that we choose, are we using some of that time for PD for remote learning? I'm assuming we know at any time, and regardless of the model we decide, people are going to do remote learning, whether it's taught by us or not, but there needs to be significant training for teachers on remote learning. So will that be the time that we're going to be doing that as well?
It'd be remote learning. It could be policy and protocols for hybrid. It could be the social emotional piece in terms of how we're addressing that, the accountability piece around grading and engagement with kids. There'll be lots to do. It'd be planning around the delivery of instruction and to meet the needs of kids.
Anyone else have any questions? Would anyone like to make a motion to change the school calendar to, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Peter.
I think in the chat, I see that Danielle has asked
excuse
to be
me.
unmuted.
Rich, can you unmute Danielle, please?
I can't even see her.
Me neither.
She dropped. Did something happen?
Okay, she's on.
On
Are
video.
you there?
I can see her. She may be on a different
Yeah.
page.
I'm here.
Oh, I see you.
Okay, there we go. I'll make a motion to amend our
Oh.
school calendar to start on September 16th for students. That's the ask, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'll make that motion.
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so that's settled. That's
So
good.
if I could ask Wendy, I just want to be 100% sure because I don't want people coming back. That was unanimous?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. Thank you.
So now the next section is Peter has a few words to say.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So we have a job to do here, and that is to work at whatever the situation is on the ground, no matter what. And I think that you have a collection of educators in the Abington Public Schools that's in their DNA. That's what they're about. And so I want to make a recommendation to my committee on the reopening of school. And then I want to answer any questions that you have. And at the end, I'm asking of the committee that you would at least start by considering the recommendation from the administrative team. And then obviously, hopefully tonight, we can have a direction from the committee. I know that we have a split vote from the last meeting, but the goal here is to get a direction so that we can, we've been working, but it would be much more productive for kids if we could start working at least toward more of a direction rather than in three different directions. Having said that, we're going to need to be ready to go in three directions, again, depending on the trajectory of this virus. But at least for the opening, I need your help so that I can get us moving in the direction the Abington Public Schools needs to move. So just a brief statement for the committee, if I could. Whether it's fair or not, Massachusetts committee members have been asked to vote on one of three possible return to school models during a pandemic. We all know it's full in, hybrid, or full remote. None of us are doctors, nurses, or epidemiologists. 2 community forums, surveys, hundreds of pages of recommendations that we boiled down to 70+ pages of PowerPoint, and many sleepless hours have been spent considering how to return. No matter what the vote tonight, I know that each committee member cares deeply. I know that by how hard you're all working at coming up with the right answer. Using safety first and the prevailing requirements for Massachusetts schools, your administrative team has worked hard at trying to find a workable plan to bring everyone back. We want everyone back. It is simply not the best plan of all of the bad choices. It is not conducive for distancing. It is not productive socially, emotionally, or for learning experiences, transportation, or budgets. It looks nothing whatsoever like anyone needs or wants schools to be. With the way we'd be staggering transitions in and out, it would even be substantially limiting to the benefit for schools to provide the daycare that some of the community needs and is looking for. As of today, as of August 4th, with 5 confirmed cases and the tracking of 40 close contacts of COVID in Abington, my recommendation is for a 2-3 split hybrid model. The different cohorts would be in school for 2 consecutive days each week. 1 day would be used for in-person, remote, teacher planning, collaboration, PD, and 2 days would be used for full remote for each group. This is far from the perfect answer. There are challenges. However, with the number of cases of COVID to date, that is the recommendation. If the numbers rise, we could always shift. If things get better, we obviously could shift more children into school. I'd ask the committee to please consider that recommendation that schools return as a 2-3 split. And if a better hybrid model emerges before the start, I'd come back to you. As you know, the impacts of any of these plans must also be collectively bargained with local unions across Massachusetts. And so myself, the administrative team, is ready to answer your questions or have that discussion. And I'd ask that when the committee felt comfortable, they would consider that option.
I have go ahead, Wendy. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, does anybody have any questions?
I have a couple.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Peter, during the past couple weeks, we've had the presentations. They've gone over what a full in-person looks like, a day looks like, how it's set up. We've had discussions on what the hybrid looks like. And a lot of the remote has just kind of been, we all know what remote is. And we do know what remote is per se, but I don't know if we all know what a remote day looks like for those students, either in a full remote setting or on their hybrid days of remote. And I didn't know if it was possible for you to discuss what those days may look like.
So if I could, I think all of the grade levels are critical, and they're critical for different reasons for that. Our high school students are nearing the end of their time with us, and we want them to be ready to go. Our early elementary students are the least apt to learn online. And so in answering that question, I think I'd like to actually ask if Chris Basta is still on the line. I know there's been a lot of questions about what happens for an early elementary student, especially with the online component. I think that would probably be a good person to ask a question, maybe Julie and Chris.
Okay, so I'm getting some feedback, sorry. Good evening, everyone. As we talked about in our last meeting, from pre-K to second grade, distance learning is super challenging and almost impossible without an adult or an older sibling to help. So there's no getting around that. To answer Chris's question, what would it look like? Research and practical experience of educators and parents, because you've all been students, points to the smaller your teacher to student ratio is, the stronger and more powerful the instruction is.
Okay.
And so that's why as we try to get closer to one-on-one instruction, things get better, right, for all students. In a hybrid setting or in full remote setting, our plan at the elementary school would be to include multiple options for small group instruction. In the hybrid model, it would be 2 full days of small group instruction where there are 12 kids in the room and 12 to 15 kids in the room, and the teacher can work with 6 at a time in small groups. And the same thing goes for a model that we've been working on, Chris, but you're right, we haven't had time to really dig into in these meetings. In a full remote scenario, we would be looking to change things from the spring. We've talked about generally making them more robust and rigorous. And the way we would do that is have scheduled small group instruction for students every day in a full remote model. So 20 to 30 minutes of literacy instruction in a small group every day, 20 to 30 minutes of math instruction in a small group every day. And then the remainder of students' time is working asynchronously, whether it's online or offline, on follow-up activities, independent practice, assessments that are related to the direct instruction they receive in the small group setting. And in a full remote setting, we would have our other staff members, tutors and paraprofessionals assigned to those groups of students to support them when they're not in the small group with the teacher. So there would be a schedule to every day in a full remote setting, with specific times working with teachers or being supported by support staff. And there would be scheduled breaks. There would be time for social emotional activities. There would be time for science and social studies. It would be a very structured day for the students and the teachers.
Chris, I get that where it comes to the full remote. But what happens if we're in a hybrid setting? And my child is going to school on Monday and Tuesday, but is home Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Let's take Wednesday out of the equation. Let's say Thursday or Friday.
Yep.
What kind of instruction can they receive if the teacher is teaching their classroom at that time?
Exactly. So, and Jonathan, you can, or Julie, you can jump in anytime if I'm missing anything. The way we've developed a hybrid plan is, as you said, on your in-school days, you're getting your modeling and guided practice with your teacher and topic introduction. So that's when they're doing the hard work of learning new content, learning a new skill. Mm-hmm. And then on that Thursday and Friday, when they're at home, they're practicing that skill. And our goal would be to have, in the same way on the full remote model, we would want to have paraprofessionals, tutors available for those students who are at home as they're doing that asynchronous work through our online platform, which we'd all be using, Canvas. We would want there to be a touch point available for each student to check in and get support when they need it. So on those days, they would be doing the independent practice and assessment of the work for what they learned with the teacher.
Okay, that I was kind of looking for you to say, when you said the paras and the tutors, that at least gives me something. Because I want to go, and Jonathan, I know you might have something to add, but if you give me 1 second. I do want to just hit on one thing, because I'd be remiss if I didn't, based on what I'm hearing from community members, that I'm told, and I can see the point from staff that the childcare part of it needs to be somewhat taken out of the equation. Like, education is not necessarily the childcare, and I'm comfortable doing that in the argument, but then you have to understand, when you start off your piece of how it would be done remotely, the fact that they would need the parent. Understand that when you take the parent out of one equation, it's hard for a lot of parents to then, why are they only taking out of one equation? And I know the answer. Like, I know you're going to tell me that the parent has to help them. It's just a fact. But understand where people in the community are coming from when they say that we don't want their like educational professionals are telling us we can't look at it as childcare, but then we have to care for our child while they're learning stuff. So that's where there's a large disconnect. You're fully aware. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's out there, and it's something that's hard for me to. I mean, that's where I'm struggling. That's where I'm getting the most feedback on both ends. So those are the things that make it difficult. When at one end we're trying to take the whole parent piece of it, where the parent has out of the equation, but then at the same time we need them.
Right, and what I think what we're trying to build into the process is the flexibility for families, so that asynchronous work that students are doing when they're not in school doesn't have to happen during the school day necessarily. That's the ideal time, because that's when the tutors and paras would be available. That's when the teacher might have office hours, because we understand that kids are going to need support. But we're giving families that flexibility. As Peter has said, as Steve said, none of these are great options.
Right, I agree completely.
These are all bad choices.
Mm-hmm.
In this scenario, with the asynchronous work being done when kids aren't in school, a child could do that work at 5 o'clock when the babysitter leaves and mom and dad get home, rather than relying on a babysitter during the day or the neighbor or whatever's unique to that family situation.
Thanks, Chris.
Anyone else have any questions?
Is there, sorry.
No, you want to go ahead and then I'll ask my question?
Just want to make sure we thoroughly hit that. If Jonathan and Julie didn't have anything to add, I know, and we can talk to Jonathan Bourne about this, and I don't want to skip Matt at the middle school, but in terms of the high school, just remember also in terms of a full in compared to remote and hybrid, we're actually covering more of the curriculum with the hybrid or the remote, because if we were full in at the secondary level, the number of staff, when we break down the rooms, the program of studies would suffer in terms of coverage of just the number of people compared to the number of classes we're able to offer. We're able to offer more with the remote and the hybrid. That is not to say that students are better served in remote or hybrid under normal circumstances, because under normal circumstances we wouldn't have to cut up our program of studies with the regulations that we're required to follow to bring everybody in. Having said that, I want to say to any of our secondary or high school parents that are listening, the entire nation is going through this, and I can't help but imagine, my kids are older, but I can't help but imagine how nervous our parents must be about our kids applying to schools at the end of this. Yes, America's children are going to be missing content at the end of this, and colleges and high schools are going to need to reset and give students an opportunity to come back from this. But please make no mistake that you're still coming from a school district that has compared to most, a greater outlay of technology, and all students across the nation have suffered in terms of content that they'll be acquiring during this time, and everyone will need to be able to make up that work. So in terms of the competitive nature that people would worry about, we're actually, I believe, in a little better shape than most places in that area. And you compound that with the fact that kids from other countries are not coming. There'll be more opportunities for our kids in our colleges. And the fact that we have an aging population, there are fewer kids even applying to college in our country. And that's why you see these small colleges folding up and being eaten up by larger colleges. So in terms of the playing field, our high school kids will be in good shape. It's not to say there won't be deficits in terms of content. They'll be able to make it up. So I don't know if that helps, but I thought it was worth mentioning.
Jackie, did you have?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the three. Let me clarify. If you choose to homeschool your child, you are unenrolling with the Abington Public Schools and you are taking on learning at home
Yes.
via homeschool curriculum or your own, whatever you deem as fit.
Yes.
If we end up with a hybrid model and you are a family in Abington who wants to remotely have your child learn remotely to start or for indefinitely, the question that I guess I understood it to be that we would have to consider purchasing you a seat in something that the state would offer on our bill, on our dime from the public school system. We would grant that to you. We would enroll you in a program that you could learn remotely while the rest return to hybrid, partially in school and with Abington teachers. But there would be a difference, or am I wrong, between those that are full remote and those that are in hybrid? Would the full remote be instructed by Abington Public School teachers?
You have it exactly right. And I would hope that they would be instructed by Abington school teachers if we could. The fear that I have is in terms of managing that system, I would want to compare the integrity of the system that we could put together with teachers that were unable to return with what the state has to offer where we could buy people seats. So I'd want to pick whichever was stronger for people. And I don't have anything to compare that to today because I don't know what teachers would be available to do that for us, and I don't have an outline of what the state program looks like yet.
Because one of the questions, I don't know where that feedback's coming from, sorry. One of the questions earlier was, if we're in a hybrid, how does the teacher teach the students who show up in person while also teaching the students that would be on the hybrid schedule, like day B, at home? And that I actually know how the teacher would do that. I get that part. The part I guess I'm thinking about is the only way we could potentially have Abington public school teachers teaching the full remote, the people who have chosen it, would be if those teachers, for whatever reason, are unable to return to work. Maybe we can make a match, but then certifications come into play. So for example, if the majority of our elementary teachers couldn't come back, but we're lacking instructors at the secondary level, that match won't work.
Correct. It just, I think some examples are physics or foreign language. Physics teachers, chemistry teachers, and foreign language teachers are, there are fewer of them. And there are fewer of them in any system. And we would have kids that would need instruction in those areas. And so perhaps we'd find a match, but I don't know that. I'm concerned we would. I think it's a lot to ask that we would have the appropriate matches. And I'm sorry, the state has not even provided what remote seats, what packages, what the name is for us to take a look at it yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Peter, I have a question. So you said that our own teachers, that we can give additional courses, and that there'll be, hold on, I have like a whole mess here. Okay, you talked about additional courses, and you said that we'll be able to offer them. Would it be our teachers that would be conducting those courses, or would that be outsourced?
So are you talking about the conversation with Jackie or the comment I made at the end of the remote and the hybrid discussion?
Yes, the comment that you made at the end.
Maybe if Jonathan Bourne were available, he could better answer what happens to the program of studies with a full in compared to a hybrid. Is that okay?
Sure.
Hi, good evening, everybody. In short, with the full in-person model of the 3 plans that we discussed, we are running it into an additional constraint with our schedule. When the schedule was run, it was run with a conceived maximum of 28 students per section. And after measuring the 3-foot minimum distance in the classroom, it would be challenging to get up to 25 students in those classrooms. There were, as of the 2 weeks ago when we met, and I could only imagine it would stay the same, 53 individual sections, so 53 individual classes that had student enrollments of 25 or higher. So those students would need to be moved. And I think one illustrative case, for example, is there's an accelerated geometry course that currently has 30 students enrolled in that. So in order to have those 5 students move to another classroom, that you would need to pull a math teacher away from another course to offer those 5 students a learning experience. Or even if you split the 30 into 2 15s, you're pulling a teacher away from somewhere else, which means another group of students are now not having their math teacher available to them. It has a cascading effect like that. So in addition to staffing, the other challenge is the lack of adequate spaces to put those classrooms. So the other option is that class of 30 could potentially be moved to the gymnasium or to another larger space in the building. This is something that with the 7-period day, I believe we have 3 spaces, the auditorium, cafeteria, and library that could potentially fit more than 25 students at 3 feet apart distance. The challenge is there are multiple courses per period that would require that accommodation. So there'd be an oversubscription for those 3 spaces. And none of that accounts for our neighbors in Mr. McCurtain in the middle school relying on those same spaces as well for their same troubles. The end result would be we'd have to look at offering classes like that accelerated geometry and not offering it to create more generalized sections of math or geometry or more general sections of English, potentially unleveled sections, potentially reducing the number of electives that are offered to move staff around to be able to accommodate core courses and graduation requirements. I'm also just very sensitive to referring to electives as not core courses. I think they are critically valuable to a student's learning experience. In fact, for some kids, the reason they go to school. But that, in short, is the impact on in-person on us being able to deliver the program of studies.
Okay. We do have band rooms on auditorium, the outside, and there's one other room, the one that's across from the nurse's room. What is that called, Peter?
The seminar room?
Seminar room.
So but we
those
have
are all
11,
spaces,
we have
right?
1,100 students here.
I know, and I'm just saying that there are additional rooms besides the ones that were stated.
Well, I think you've got competing needs between 2 buildings with hundreds of kids in them. And I think I'm going to throw it out there. Library, cafeteria, gym, seminar room, and outdoors when it's not raining.
Right.
Can I add just one more component of that?
Yep.
If there are 53 sections that will be over enrolled looking for additional spaces, if they are evenly spread out among all 7 periods, and they won't be, that would be 7 periods or 7 classes per period that need an additional space. And typically with scheduling, it would more likely be 10 or more in a given period. So like period 1 might have 10 classes that are over and period 7 might only have 3, but it is really random. So the number of spaces that I could use for those classes would run out really quickly.
Thanks for the information. I probably didn't state it right, but actually what I was looking for is you had said that if we were to stay home, then you would be able to offer more different types of classes to our students. So what are the additional classes that they would get, and would they be taught by our teachers?
No, they wouldn't be additional classes. We'd be more able to fulfill the program of studies we currently have. Whereas if we came in person, we wouldn't.
Okay.
And that's not to say that there are gaps in learning with all three.
Right. So you had said before that that there were some like issues and obstacles with the remote learning. And so I just wanted to know if you could clarify what they were and how we can improve on them, and what are the consequences if they aren't improved by a teacher.
Well, I think they need to be improved by the system, because at the time of the implementation, we did it all on the fly.
Right.
Everything happened online. People left their rooms, and they
Right. No, I get it.
So they did a good job given the conditions that we had.
Can I interrupt you? Because what I should say is that the reason why I'm asking this is because people have like contacted me, and I've done some research about other states and their remote learning teachers. They have over hundreds and hundreds of hours, and I don't know, more schooling or different kind of qualifications, certifications. So how in that PD period of the 2 weeks can we get our remote or our teachers to be the same quality teachers that they are? Because it's a totally different experience. Our teachers have been in person with somebody for 30 years, so they might not, you know what I mean? They don't have like the same, it's just different, I would think. I mean, I feel it's different than me sitting in front of you guys talking like this than it would be if I was in person with you. You know what I mean? It's like a different feeling.
Let me start with what we heard at the end of the last experience that we would look to improve. Accountability across the board in terms of taking attendance, feedback and grades, assignments and assessments, checking in with families more synchronously, but then also having the asynchronous option, so if they couldn't be at the computer screen, they could find a way to make up that time, because families' lives are still going to be chaotic. More of a regularly scheduled day, so that students that are able to get into a routine can get into a routine. And those are what we heard at the close of school last year, and those are the things that we are already working on with a remote, because no matter what we do, we're gonna need to have a remote ready to go. So
there was kids, like I got some emails that, or it's not, I'm sorry, I didn't get emails. I saw people write on Facebook that, they started remote learning and then it wasn't going well for them. So they stopped. Like, what's going to happen with any children or parents that decide that remote learning isn't for them?
We're going to reach out the same way that, unfortunately, sometimes even when we're in person, we have kids that don't access the learning. And it's our job to never give up and try to get them to access it. That's what we do every day.
Also, the state has guidelines out now for remote learning that were not out in the spring, to sort of add a layer of accountability, like attendance, for example, has to be taken. Grading has to be done. So there are some things that, people who know me know I love accountability, but the layers are helpful. So the teacher, let's pick Jackie, who decides to, I don't know a lot of teachers who do this, but a teacher who decides to do less than stellar job, suddenly their administrator is knocking, saying, like, attendance has been taken, grades aren't done, or don't have you signed on the amount of times that we need you signed on. And that just layers back to the state level, that the state can come back to Abington and say, what's up with your remote learning plan? Where's your attendance? So these layers are being built. We say this all the time, but the plane is being built and we're flying it at the same time. So I feel more confident that the guidelines, that's one set of guidelines that are going to be helpful. I don't know how administrators feel or if anybody wants to weigh in on that, but just wanted to mention it.
Peter, when you mentioned feedback, not so much, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt if anybody was going to go, but when you mention there'll be repercussions, aren't the right word, like there'll be grading, they'll be reaching out, and I go back to where Chris mentioned how if it's going to be flexible to work around parents' schedules and things like that. So if you can't get to something till 5 o'clock or whatever, if a parent doesn't get to something till 5 o'clock, I can tell you right now that something is going to be math and ELA, and everything else is probably going to fall by the wayside. So how do you penalize? Like, I'm having trouble wrapping my head around penalizing a student who can't access the work without their parents there. Their parents are done with work at 5 o'clock. They do their best to help them with math and ELA, and then they just don't get to the rest. So what are we going to do with though? I mean, how is phys ed going to be done remotely? How is music going to be done remotely? If you have to pick as a parent, because this is what happened, and this will happen in this, and if there's repercussions in terms of grading, then I think we need to know that now. Those are just going to get the ones that get skipped when parents are forced to choose between having to work and help their child. And when they help their child, they're going to help them with those core subjects. And that's going to be the focus. We can hope for the best, but I'm talking reality here.
So I disagree with that reality that and I'm just thinking of personal experience during this past spring remote learning. I was working without be able to look up from my computer, and I thought things were going well. Maybe I've shared this example before. And I received an email from Noah's teacher who said, "Oh, by the way, Mrs. Abrams, I know these are tough times, but your son hasn't done work in 2 weeks." Now, as a parent, I thought things were going great in my house. Everyone's laptop was open. I did not do any ELA math work with him. So once that was determined and I was able to intervene, his teacher made herself. I don't know that this is true. It may be how it works all the time, but it then became a thing between teacher and student to figure out how to reopen Canvas, get the work back out that Noah had missed or chosen not to do because he was watching Fortnite videos on YouTube. But that's where I see us going, is us being able to anticipate some problems and saying the reality might be that that's the part of the teachers have to pick up now, saying we know that this stuff happens. We know that math and ELA gets, if a parent's not around to help, it's going to have to be us who finds ways to intervene. And to me, that looks like what Dr. Basta said about programming our remote learning to include groups of students in smaller numbers. It's not helpful to have 25 kids log on and stare like the Brady Bunch like we're doing right now. Like, we're not knowing a lot about individuals. If we were to break it down for 8 faces for 15 minutes, that's where we problem solve some of that. And hopefully with a stronger remote plan, the load of what's expected of parents at home, like, because the parents can't. I physically cannot help at home and work. And so that part I hear loud and clear, but I think there's some things that are being thought about, at least in my district, to help problem solve some of that.
Okay, I was going back to where Chris mentioned how if you had to log on at 5 o'clock because your parents are working, that it was flexible where you could be on there and do those things. And as he mentioned, it's better if during the school day, because that's when the staff's available to assist, but they're not available to assist at 5 o'clock. And I mean, kids at Dr. Basta's school, their bedtimes can be 7:30 too. So I just, I talked to Peter today, and I can see where, like, I let him know I could have an idea where a remote plan could work for a secondary level, for a high school level. I know it comes with its own set of repercussions of those kids and the things they have to do. But in terms of actually being able to access the work independently, those kids can do that on their own. I just struggle with the remote aspect of elementary schools?
So to answer your question, I think the answers that we're trying to give you are just the plain truth, and acknowledging that there are going to be challenges in homes and there's a flexibility in this model is just acknowledging the reality. It's not making it a worse option than the other options. It's still, the least bad, because on the in-person side, what's going to go on in schools in full in-person is, again, not what anybody wants. We've already spent a lot of time on that, and people are accusing us of probably spending too much time on that. But I want to circle back. It would be unfortunate that families choose only math and English. I hear what you're saying. Our teachers in the other areas, those are performance and more project-based areas, and those lessons would be performance and project-based, and trying to get the students to engage in those things. And the same accountability piece will be in place for all subjects. And I think it was Jonathan Bourne who said that some of those subjects are the reason some kids come to school. So it's not necessarily one size fits all for families.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think you said it key. That's why they come to school.
So although none of these is the perfect solution, some are better than others, and we're just trying to answer your questions, plainly and honestly.
And I appreciate it. I do.
Any one of those things can be used as an argument to pick that apart, but make no mistake, the full in-person is far uglier.
I think to follow up on what Jackie said, in the spring, we had many teachers, Chris, who reached out specifically to families when there were some problems with our kindergarten or first grade, second grade students, either completing work or joining synchronous sessions. And they were able to work things out with those families. Were there some families that consistently had problems? Yes. But for the most part, with the support of their teachers and collaborating to figure out, well, okay, this is a problem for Joey because of your situation at home. Let's try it this way. Sort of individual solutions. That's what we do in school, and that's what most of our teachers were able to do for families in the spring. And of course, there were some exceptions.
Yeah. And I mean, understand, Chris, I'll do everything I can, but there are plenty of families that aren't in as good of a situation that I'm in to be able to make it work, where I'm able to work from home still. And my employer recognizes the fact that my children might be home. And these are the parents that, not all these questions are necessarily mine. These are the people that are reaching out with how do they go about handling a situation where their children are remote. So I'm trying to ask the questions so that if they're listening, they can hear the answers.
So just touching base back on that, another challenge with the project base and the performance in terms of those subject areas, these instructors are also trying to find things that kids can do at home with readily available materials and tools. And that's a challenge because I think somebody said earlier, nobody wants to build roller coasters with their kids when they're doing remote learning, or very few people do. So you asked how those lessons would go, and I tried to outline that, and I tried to outline what the grading and the accountability would be.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? You had said, I don't know where we're at with what we asked for from the state. So do we have computers for K through 2 students to give them? How are they going to access all of this if they don't have a computer, a printer, and everything at their house?
Felicia, in terms of the technology on its way to Abington and what you've done for ordering, would you help us?
Sure. So we've ordered enough laptops that by hopefully they'll be in the middle to end of September, that all students 5 through 12 will have a laptop to bring home, a 1-to-1. And we'll have enough devices that families that do not have a device at home will be able to provide a device per child at home for those families that don't have devices. In the spring, we were able to provide one laptop per family, and some families were able to get more than one, where we believe that we'll be able to provide the number of devices that are needed for K through 4 families.
Okay.
So no one will have to share.
Right. So can I ask a question about PD for teachers for remote? Like, would that, how does that, do you go out of state to another state that has an abundance of remote teachers and you ask them to teach? Like, who teaches the class?
We've got good people for remote. Our teachers have already had a baptism of fire with it. They're ready for the next phases and steps in terms of sophistication with this. And you talk about these programs that are providing, the remote. If you want to provide me more information on what they are, we can take a look at some of their practices. I would want to. You got to do a side-by-side comparison of these things, and when you're shopping, you can go to 3 different supermarkets and you can tell right away which one's better as a customer and which one you like better. But when you're going to your neighborhood schoolhouse, you're really comparing your neighborhood schoolhouse to just what you want. There is no side-by-side comparison. So we can do those things as we look at different approaches.
Peter, I have a question going back to accountability. I know you talked about like attendance and grading, and I think that's important to maybe make remote learning maybe more even at the high school or middle school level more successful. How will that be done? Is there like a certain time that people would have to check in like for an attendance, or is it whether they logged in that day, they handed something in that day? Like how will that work to make students accountable? I mean, I don't know, it might be different at different schools and different age levels, but how will it work?
I believe through the teachers, through the learning management system, we'd be able to track the participation.
So just if they participate in something for that day, then that is counted as attendance
for that thing. And then what I would hope to do is if there are things that they could make up because of the chaos in a family, that they can do that work asynchronously. That's the hope.
Right. Okay.
So is that question for hybrid or remote?
Maybe both.
Because if it's remote, they would be attending their classes, all of their classes each day. So it would be a regular school day where they go to each class and the teachers would actually be in school all day, correct?
Yes.
Well, the high school would, but the elementary.
Right.
No, I think we're structuring the elementary remote schedule in a fully remote environment to mirror the school day, where we would have structured times. Certain classes would start at a normally scheduled time. For instance, the reading block would start as scheduled at 9:30, and a specialist would be scheduled for students to attend. It's one of the improvements that we're really seeking a lot of people asked for structure and to guide a student through their day, so we built that.
Jonathan, are you saying that the the remote days of elementary, the plan would be to have live in-person learning with educators?
I think we have to, I want to make sure that you're talking about a fully remote model.
Well, I'm talking, okay, that's okay. I do. All right, I understand where you're coming from. Okay, so let's talk fully remote model then.
Yep.
Is that I understand. So I understand the caveat, and anything asked has to undergo negotiations with AEA. Yeah. But is the plan in the full remote version of the plan that the administrative team has come up with, does that have staff having live sessions, let's say during the actual school? I use 8 to 2 as a broad definition, but during the actual school day, they would
Yes.
have those sessions when like they would normally have them?
Yes, it does. And with some significant, hopefully improvements on some of what we tried to do in the spring. For instance,
Okay.
we're talking about structuring a classroom would be grouping their students into 3 different sessions. So for instance, instead of, we all know the challenges of trying to have, 24 kids on a screen and working with them in a live environment. So we thought about that, and we're offering a structure that would, for instance, in X homeroom, you've got a group of 8 students, and that's my math group A, and I'm meeting only with my math group A at 9:30, and I get to know and walk those students through things in a more intimate setting, and then about 30 minutes later, I'm switching gears and I'm picking up my math group B. Et cetera. So not only would they be getting live instruction, they'd be getting live instruction that is similar to small group instruction.
Okay, I guess that's what I was looking for earlier when I asked what does a remote day look like.
I also want to circle back to something that when you were talking about the hybrid models and the challenges of being an educator who's teaching on a Monday and Tuesday, and then also teaching a cohort on Thursday and Friday, and how they can track the students who may or may not be getting to their work on time, et cetera. One of the significant advantages of that versus what we had in the spring is that they'll see those students again in a couple of days. And obviously, as we all get this up and running, if we were to go with a hybrid model, we have the ability to help those students build up their capacity to interact with the Canvas courses on their off days, on their not on-site days. And if they're still having trouble, they're going to be given ample sort of goodwill, and they'll get them back on when they're on campus in a couple of days, and they'll probably be able to work with them sitting right there next to a laptop and showing them how to navigate and asking questions about maybe what the barriers were to some of the assignments that weren't being completed or whatever. I know that they did this in a fully remote way, so it would even be easier to know if someone's fallen a little bit behind, I'm going to see them in a couple days.
Okay. No,
do you need me to answer or clarify some more about the remote plan? I think Chris, Julie, and I, especially at the elementary level, we've really put a lot of thought into it, and we really feel that we are building a plan that took into consideration a lot of the feedback that we got in the spring from parents, from teachers, things that we saw that we weren't able to do great. Mm-hmm. And so what we've got is hopefully reflective of that. I think just even that piece of knowing that a student is in a smaller group, that a teacher's not trying to sift through, live feedback for 24 9-year-olds would it's not working. So the way we're structuring it, it's going to work a lot better.
I guess I'm feeling like a little bit confused. So I feel like last week with the meeting, we talked about whether it's remote learning, that it's not like live learning because of privacy and all other things that we couldn't really do live learning. But I feel like, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it sounds like you're saying like now we are doing live learning with the remote model.
What we talked about last week was the ability to have there couldn't be a stream that was broadcast of that class because of some privacy issues, but the students
kids in it.
Correct.
Kids.
Okay.
So
kids wouldn't be in it. That's
right.
What you're saying. This would just be like the teacher teaching. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, I think what we're talking about in a remote environment would be a teacher with some students in Microsoft Teams.
Okay. Just in small.
Last week we were talking about projecting a live lesson to those students who are home remote learning, which is different than working with a small group.
Okay.
And again, that's something that's, right now, obviously all of this is subject to negotiation, but one of the pieces that we've seen that could be an advantage is, for instance, if some part of the family schedule didn't allow a student to attend their math lesson that day, that there would be a way for the teacher to record an example lesson or a quick 10 to 15 minute overview that the student could watch later, catch up on, and then hopefully maybe provide an option to get a little catch up, or maybe they handle that in their office hour with their teacher.
Can I ask a question? So Jeanette, when she was with us, she used to always talk about Canvas and how a lot of teachers weren't up to par on it. And I know that you and I had a discussion about it the other day, and you said that a lot of Peter and I had a discussion the other day, and you said that teachers were used to different platforms, and they're now coming together, those that didn't know, and they're learning how to use it. So are those teachers, have they now completed the Canvas on how to navigate through it so that they'll be ready for PD or whatever we, bring upon them when they go back to school for the first 2 weeks?
So I think what Jeanette's concern was about the consistent posting of grades.
Right. And it was just because not everyone used it, not everyone knew how to use it.
And
that's going to be our focus of use. I just want to make sure that everyone's on board.
Oh, Canvas is the learning management system. Yes.
Okay.
To answer the question. But you said a lot there,
Okay.
So I just want to touch on some of those things.
Okay, good.
So when you say we've done a year's worth of PD on something, in schools you don't have enough PD time, because we've got the full days at the beginning where you're getting ready for your opening, and then we've got the half days throughout the year. And we also have had initiatives around active shooters. We've had initiatives around social emotional learning. We've got curriculum work to do. And so, there's the NEASC work at the high school. So yes, we've done some, years of working on technology and Canvas and the delivery of lessons online and using those resources. But let's not confuse, 2 years with what is a collection of half days. And again, I said this earlier, now teachers had, unfortunately, a baptism of fire with these systems at the end of the last school year. All summer, teachers have been working with our technology office already, because the Abington teachers, not all of the teachers, but some of the teachers, many of the teachers have, because they want to improve what they're doing. And this learning management system, Canvas, is, to answer the question, is going to be the focus in terms of consistent, thoughtful accountability and delivery of educational service in a remote and a hybrid model.
Thanks. Anyone else? Danielle?
I just had one, it's a comment, not a question. Just if we do end up remote for any reason at any point in time, I'm assuming that would take into consideration that, even though I just had reiterated that remote would be a typical, well, sort of typical full day, and that kids would go to all their classes, it would be brutal for them to sit behind a screen for that number of hours. So I know that will be it's more just a statement to everybody that I'm assuming that would be taken into consideration.
Activity, movement, variety, rotation has been a part of what I've seen from, if I don't get a chance to say it at some point tonight, the best group of administrators that I think I could ever work with in the Abington Public Schools. They're crushing it every day.
Something, I agree with you, Peter, they are crushing it every day. But something I just want to come back to, Danielle, you made me think of it, is this idea of movement. We keep comparing old, what we used to do to what we're going to do. And I just think we need to be really careful, because as you were talking about kids being logged on from home, but from behind a screen, and how that's a lot of sitting. I guess I'm coming at it from a different angle of just how I like to work as a human. When I'm home, even working behind a screen, which I hated, I had permission, because I'm an adult, to change locations. I could choose to leave my kitchen area and move to my dining room. I could leave my dining room and sit on the rug in my living room. There were days that I sat in my bed and did work. I guess one of my hangups is the idea of what real school looks like. And you guys know my lens is, or my expertise is K to 5. I even wonder about middle school and high school though, and their ability to sit in a full in-person model in a seat with no PE that's been taken, unless they're going to do yoga or non-contact type of movement. No moving to lunch to have their lunch break. So I only bring that up more as a comment that we just have to be careful that when we say we are sending them back, that we're just reminding ourselves what back to school will look like in person.
Can I ask another question? Where for remote, if we go remote, are the teachers going to be at home or will they be in the classrooms? Like, how will that be handled?
Subject to the collective bargaining agreement, what I would prefer is for teachers to be able to come in and use their classrooms and the resources of the school building if those environments are safe, and that's something that we can do.
Thank you.
You just said something that's really giving me difficulty tonight. You said subject to collective bargaining agreement, and I understand that. And in talking with Mr. Shannon, something that I understood to be a given doesn't seem to necessarily be a given. And that is that because the way it's been presented to us was that whatever situation we choose, those as defined by Dr. Robbins with the highest need would receive preferential treatment for in-person learning. It's hard for me tonight to sit here and think about something that, if not done the way I'm thinking about it in my mind, could backfire on what I'm actually saying yes to. Does that make sense?
So I think I know where you're going, and that is that no matter what happens, we're going to be, and I think you heard Steve say, and I don't want to speak for Steve, if he's still there, he could clarify for us if the committee wished. Those high need students and in-person learning is a priority.
It's a priority, but in full in person, they're obviously going to be in person. And the way I understood it to be presented, and maybe it was just the way I interpreted it, was that they would get more time in person in a hybrid model, or in a remote they would still be prioritized. But it still seemed like that's something that still needs to be worked out. And maybe it always was something that needed to be worked out, but maybe I understood it differently the whole time.
So I think you have it right, including the part that it needs to be worked out. So here's what happens with collective bargaining agreements, with all collective bargaining agreements and unions. You have an agreement, and if you change the working conditions of that agreement, that is subject to negotiation with the members of the collective bargaining union. So, yes.
Can I just add a piece to this though? If a district, let's pretend Abington, decided to go full remote, we have to, correct me if I'm wrong, basically when we notify the State Department of Ed that that's what we're doing, in some ways they're almost like, well, we don't like that. Let us help you get some people back in the buildings. And what they typically suggest, or what they're suggesting, maybe that's where this came from, is they're suggesting the idea of those with the highest need, like kids who need to be in school to have certain accommodations met, start with at least that population of students. And what do you need to make that feasible? Because I think it would be, and I'm not speaking, I know everything's subject to negotiation, but I don't know that unless there's an unreasonable request why certain students can't re-enter, I feel like that there is some understanding that the state has an expectation that certain populations are going to need to come back regardless of whether we're remote or hybrid. Am I?
But they would need a staff member there to instruct them, Jackie. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and I guess I'm
And
banking.
be with kids. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you.
And
Yep.
that is the priority, and you have it right, to have those students here with a staff member. And everything is subject to collective bargaining.
And
I
we
mean,
do,
I cannot say that.
but we do have staff members who are already back in our school buildings this summer working with specialized populations. So, I mean, we can't assume that they'll want to return in the fall, but I think that I don't know, it's just something that maybe I made an assumption that I shouldn't make, that we will be able to get some of our special education population back first.
And I think that they and James Robbins have done a good job with those kids this summer. We were down there the other day just before it ended, and you know, they having those students in person is a priority.
Peter, can I ask you how many students there were in all the schools?
Could maybe we unmute James? Thank you. Oh, you knew that was coming. Rich, thanks.
Yeah, we had in total at the end of the summer we had 70 students there. It wasn't a staggered schedule, so it wasn't 70 all at one time. But throughout the course of the day, there were 70, and there were 19 staff members.
What was the average group size, James?
I didn't run the numbers in terms of the actual average, but I would say it ranged from 3 to 7. Probably 4.5. It gave us a lot of great insight about how to work with students with disabilities during the COVID era. Although, of course, that doesn't necessarily generalize to how to support much larger classes, which I know is the thrust of our conversation right now. But I think it was very helpful for planning for the fall.
So did you guys learn anything that would help to go back to school, or you know, did you find any issues that you think that it would have been better to stay away from school for summer? I mean, because from what I hear, it was 4 weeks and it went off without a hitch. So is there anything that you would change?
No, what I would say is that it's definitely evidence that we should prioritize in-person learning for students with disabilities in the fall. But again, that's for students with disabilities, and that's consistent with DESE's guidelines. I think it is something that we could manage and carry into the fall. But what I don't think it does is give us enough information about just sort of the wider school population in terms of having such a great number of kids within the building. That's where a lot of the challenges come to. But in terms of educating kids with significant disabilities who wouldn't be able to learn from a computer screen, despite having a licensed special educator on the other side, what it says to me is that it is something that we should pursue, which is in-person instruction for kids with significant disabilities in the fall. And that's what DESE wants. And it does seem like there are some special educators who are interested in carrying that into the fall, kind of as Jackie was alluding to.
Right, and I think that's great. And with the special, like you said, high needs, like, does that include anyone with IEPs or modification plans? Would they have the ability to go in to the classroom if they would like, or is it really high needs? Like, I don't want to be, I can't say what is high needs and what isn't. So I don't know if you can, because I don't know.
Yeah. So there are about 360 students with IEPs on the in the Abington Public Schools. Just to put that in context, there are 2,100-ish Abington students, total students in the district. So not all 360 students would be prioritized for in-person learning. The phrasing that DESE uses is significant and complex disabilities. So these are students whose needs in the overall realm of special ed are greater than average. So what helps us determine that is the level of service that they receive during the day, and also if there are what we call comorbid factors, which is just another challenging factor on top of their disability, such as homelessness, such as being an English learner, and so on. So to answer your question, not all of the students would be eligible for full-time in person, but a number of students would be, including students connected to our TLC programs. They above all would be prioritized for in person. And then there's just sort of another group of students who fall into what we call the partial inclusion program, where they're not quite TLC students but have a significant number of need. They would also be prioritized for some in-person learning.
That's important. Thank you.
That inclusion part does take a hit as part of this, though, right? I mean, you don't have the role models in turn. I'm assuming that unless some role models would also be part of a prioritize if parents were willing to have their children be part of that.
Yep, that's Chris. What you're speaking to, yeah, that's a challenge we'll have, particularly at the preschool level, because Desi has said that students who are at the preschool age who have a disability are prioritized for in-person instruction. However, part of the value of participating in the preschool program is having access to typical peer role models for kids without disabilities to have that peer modeling. And so it could be the case that we're ready to go to have those preschoolers in, but we wouldn't have their peer models. We'll do our best to have those models in place, but that could be a challenge, and that's something a lot of districts are grappling with. It's also the case that when we think in terms of our co-taught classes, when you think going up from like grades 1 through grade 6, those are students who have disabilities who tend to be moderate needs, who are educated among their typical peer population. It's likely going to be the case that to adequately meet their needs in either a remote or hybrid model, they'll be getting more small group instruction among other kids with disabilities than typical like inclusive practices. So that's one challenge that we're struggling to find our way through. That's a statewide problem, but it's one of the challenges.
Thanks, James.
Does anyone else have any questions? So if I'm not seeing or hearing any more questions, I guess we would go to Peter's recommendation. And so would anyone like to make a motion on Peter's recommendation of doing a hybrid 2-3 model?
Wendy, were we gonna all speak prior to this, or were we making the motion on?
Did I just skip something? Because it's been so long. Tell me. Hold on. Can I go back to what I have the order of? Hold, please. I'm sorry for this. Take a little break, everybody.
It seems like you have it right, Wendy, according
No, I think,
oh, no,
so, yeah, no, I don't. So you are correct, Lisa. You win. Would you?
I don't want to win.
So at this point, I think all the committee members maybe have something to say. If they'd like to say it, no pressure. So would anyone, I'm sorry, reverse all of what I said about Peter's recommendation, and we're going to go this route of just all the committee members can speak if they'd like. And if anyone would like to go first, feel free. Chris, would you like to go first?
Am I just kind of giving thoughts right now? I don't have to.
Correct.
Okay. So I think tonight has at least given me some information that I maybe didn't have before. I still have extreme trepidation is not the right word, but drawback on how this will work for elementary school students. I do think a hybrid or remote model can work better in a high school or secondary environment, much better than it can in elementary school. If the simple fact when I say that is the student's ability to access the curriculum and complete the curriculum, not whether they will do it or not, but just simply their ability to get on a computer, get on the website, and access it. So that does give me some trepidation. At the same time, I think I've mentioned that I hope. So I guess my hope would be if it's a full remote or if it's a hybrid, that the Abington teachers would work with those parents. If there's issues where they can't get to something, that they work out a way, or maybe they understand and something gets put to the side for a little bit, or it's extended on a deadline. Those are all things that I hope. I've had great interaction with most of the Abington teachers here, and I really have trouble seeing any of them saying no. What I'm struggling right now is with finite things when it comes to negotiations, to be quite honest with you. At the same time, I look at the guidance from the CDC. I look at the guidance from the AAP that tell us how important it is to get in-person learning back in. The time away from school and the interruptions that create the emotional social isolation needs. Schools play an important part in identifying different abuses that students go through. I shudder to think at what may be unreported right now without having schools there to help with that aspect of it. The physical and mental upsides associated with reopening, in my opinion, to a point, do outweigh the risks. Based on the AAP evidence, the AAP has that children are not super spreaders they may have initially feared to be. At this time, Abington has 5 active cases. If you told me Abington had 25 active cases right now, I may feel differently than I do. And again, I don't know where I'm going to go with all this. But I'm torn, and I do feel that I see the struggle, and I feel the struggle that is going to be put on elementary families with any kind of remote learning, whether it be hybrid or full remote. That said, I am encouraged by Mr. Hawes's statements about the live sessions that'll look to take place throughout the day. And I don't know if it was Dr. Basta earlier who mentioned how they would try to have paras, tutors available for students on their hybrid remote days. I would ask that it try to be more than a try and almost try to make it a thing. I understand that, again, everything I say is subject to the negotiation part of it. And I know where the AEA stance is. Received many emails this weekend letting me know where their stance is. But there are members of the AEA that do want to be back in school too, that do want to be back in school today, tomorrow, are okay with the precautions put in place. I've talked to them. I've talked to a bunch of different people. So those are the thoughts I have. If you're not asking me for a vote right now, I'll wait to make when a motion is made and decide at that time. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Chris. Would anyone like to go next? Otherwise, I will. Oh, go ahead, Danielle.
Okay, I'll be quick. I have mine all set to go. And I'm just going to read if that's okay.
Sure.
If you don't mind repetition, I'm going to share some of the words I said last week before we offer our vote. Like I said before, the decision we've been asked to make will be a highly unpopular one, no matter what the outcome is. But the reality is that not making a decision is not an option, no matter how much we dislike the 3 situations on the table. After tonight, we need to come together as a community and move forward, supporting each other as best we can to keep our staff and students safe and deliver the best possible education we can to our children. These are the 2 factors we needed to keep in mind while making our decision. Delivering the best possible education means going back to school and being together in a classroom as much as possible. So much of the success of any given year comes directly from the community we create and the routines that we establish together in those first few weeks and months of the school year. Students get to know the teachers and classmates, expectations are reinforced, and a family of learners is forged. Growth comes when students feel connected, comfortable, and empowered, and this happens best in person. I would love to go back in full, at least for a few weeks, and I've spent hours and hours trying to will it to work, but it's hard to reconcile going back in full with the information that we've been presented. We must be in compliance with the mandates that Massachusetts has issued, and class sizes are too high in several grades. There's no way to seat classes of 25 plus kids 3 to 6 feet apart. Due to COVID, the budget isn't such that we can hire more teachers to alleviate this problem. I mentioned last week that despite valiant efforts by educators in Abington and everywhere, remote learning from March to June was not what we need it to be to deliver the best possible education. Teachers haven't been trained in online instruction. It's a new, very different job. And the 10 days that they'll be given at the beginning of the year will only be a fraction of what they need. Remote learning will once again be like building and flying an airplane at the same time. If we can safely get back into our schools for some face-to-face, in-person relationship building and instruction, even if it's only for a few days a week, for a few weeks or months, and even if we only have student desks in the room, I believe we will deliver a better learning experience for our students. Students might not be able to see our mouths or the way our eyes crinkle when we smile at them, but they will hear the love in our voices and will feel our positive energy. On a final note, I ask that the community be patient and supportive no matter what happens in the fall. Teaching is an unbelievably beautiful, complicated, and emotional dance under normal circumstances. Mastering the steps and delivering a perfect performance takes time. It involves trials, reflection, and modification. We have never learned this new dance, and you'll be asking us to do it in 10 days. Please know that teachers love your children and will do the very best they can no matter what happens with this vote. Just like our students thrive on encouragement, patience, and grace, so do we as teachers. We will learn this new dance better with your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Lisa?
Okay, well, I guess I'd want to start off by just thanking the parents and the families of Abington and the faculty and staff and anyone that took the time to reach out to me and the other committee members. Your input was really important to me, and I know this is a really difficult decision for us all to make. And I know I don't share maybe the same opinion as some of the emails or the conversations or the messages that I received, but I do respect and appreciate everybody's opinions. And I know there's a lot of pros and cons to each of these models, and I know none of them are ideal. I've read countless articles and guidelines and tons of information, just like we all have. But I know one thing: when we did survey the people of Abington, based on the surveys, not only the parents and families, but the faculty and staff, I know that more than half of the parents, faculty, and staff that completed the survey responded that they wanted to return to school in person in some capacity, whether it was a hybrid model or a full in-person model. And I know families still have the option to do a full remote learning if they don't feel comfortable with being in the school. However, we figure out that will be delivered. So, like I said before, this is difficult and a stressful decision to make. I know we've all lost sleep over it. And I know how invested the school committee and our administration, the faculty and staff, and the families in Abington are. I'm reading my thing and I lost my spot. But I know how invested everybody is in our children, and I know we all want what's best for them. I just feel a hybrid model would probably be best, for a gradual progression back to in-person learning. And I know that's ultimately where we all want to be. So hopefully we can all work together and support each other and make this decision together for what's best for everybody.
Thanks, Lisa. Jackie?
Sure. So I have a couple of things I want to say. First off, one issue I have is the conflicting information that comes out in the form of guidelines. I read today something that was put out by the CDC with guidance, and in one of the bullets it mentions why opening our schools are so important because, and there were many reasons they listed, one being physical movement and the importance of movement and things like physical education. And then you look at the DESE guidelines that are put out that say physical education isn't going to happen anymore unless it's non-contact. It suggests in parentheses things for us staff members to do with kids, such as yoga or other conditioning activities that they can do separated. So one issue I have is who's writing these? Who is writing these guidelines? Do they talk to one another? And then do they talk to the people who are asked to implement them? And so a strength and a flaw of mine is that I tend to be realistic and practical all the time. It works in my favor in some situations and it doesn't in others. And in this situation, here are my thoughts. It's important to me to be realistic and practical in our back to school planning. Remote learning is a possibility in the 2021 school year. We cannot control the trajectory of the virus. We don't know what will happen. We know what has happened. We know where we are now, but we have to plan, in my mind, that at some point, and I would love to be wrong, but we have to plan that at some point we're going to have to go into a situation where either somebody contracts it or a cohort contracts it, or the numbers have risen to a point that we determine once again that we need to close schools. With that in mind, in my brain, we need to get it right. We need to not have a repeat of what happened in the spring, and we need to unroll a remote plan that is quality. And when we talk a lot about K through 5, where I work and where I spent all last week doing professional development with teachers who were giving up their time to come learn how to teach children virtually through the computer. And one of the things I said to them is, one of the reasons the spring was such a failure was that we put children in a situation that they had no idea what they were doing. So it's important to me that we take it slow, that we teach our students, K through 12, what the remote platform looks like. While we're doing that, we bring in our special populations of students who we know and need priority in terms of in-person learning. I hate to say that in some way they're guinea pigs, because I don't mean that, but I wonder if bringing in smaller populations to start will give us the ability to test our logisticals, like our logistics. We don't know what hybrid will look like. It seems disastrous to me to say, to treat schools like a light switch, that we shut them off in March and we can simply switch them back on go time in a world that we've never done it. So I would love, my end goal is for us to be back. I wish that was what we were doing, but I also want to set us up so that it's not a mess if we decide to go hybrid. We have to properly vet the areas that we don't have control over yet. For example, if we find the space to put students who may appear like they have symptoms, who's staffing it? And at the last meeting, we said principals. I don't know who's ever worked in a school, but it's tough to find the principal because the principal is running here, there, and everywhere. So that makes me uncomfortable. I'm also not a doctor, so I don't know what could possibly happen when we bring kids back together, even at 50% capacity. We shut down and our numbers looked good. We haven't yet have any data on what does it look like. Georgia just went back to school this week. My cousin is a teacher in Georgia. I'm in touch with her. I want to see what happens. I think we have to be strategic and thoughtful in our plan so that it works, because I don't think it's fair to families to say mid-year, never mind, scratch that idea, that hybrid thing we tried, it didn't really work. To me, we have to build a foundation, and the foundation seems like, especially at the lower grades, let them understand how the platform for virtual learning works. Teach them so that they're not dependent on parents to say, how do I do this? How do I do that? It's possible. We've done it. Teachers are magicians and they'll do it, I promise, with proper planning. And then hopefully we go move into hybrid. And if we have to back up because of data, at least we back up to a place where our children are comfortable and said, oh, we know this. We've done this before. We know what to do. The last thing I would say is just that in K-2, and I guess this is to the point I just made, anyone who works in those grades will know that on a typical day in normal school, if you go into a kindergarten through second grade classroom and you say, boys and girls, this morning, we're going to do ELA instead of math. And what will happen in those classrooms is that the kids say, wait, what? We always do math in the morning. Now we're doing ELA? And it's like a really big deal. So that is relevant because it'll be a really big deal to start hybrid with our youngest population and then say, never mind, remember the teacher you used to see twice a week, she's not there anymore, but good luck at home and hope you get started. So those are all the things that are in my brain. And the last thing I want to say is that obviously you all can tell that I'm in favor of full remote. And one of the most important reasons for that is that it leaves no one off the train. I'm very uncomfortable for the families. I'm not as worried about the virus as some of the people that have written to me are. That being said, I respect the virus and I respect those families who are very afraid of it. And if we go hybrid and we cannot give those families Abington Public Schools teachers to teach their children remotely, I worry about the level of love and care that they will get from us buying them a seat in a remote platform. So I just think we can't will ourselves back to school. As much as if I could, I would. And I know you're not asking for a vote right now, Wendy, but it's pretty clear that I'm in favor of a slow remote start with a phased in approach to bringing kids back.
Thank you, Jackie. So for me, I actually had a speech all prepared last night, and I went through it today, and I started just deleting paragraphs, and I think I came up with one sentence because everything has just changed all the time, just so much. And this is really, and I've been in contact with people. I understand that everybody feels differently. This has been so crazy for me. I wake up, I think about it. I go to bed, I think about it. Every time you turn around, I'm calling Peter and I'm saying, what about this? And he calls me his dark, he says that he's my dark cloud, because he's always telling me like, oh, I don't think it's going to work. And I've just never really tried to come up with a solution as much as I am for this. So, it's been really hard because I see everybody's emails too. And I don't want to see anybody hurt. I have, a grandmother that I help take care of. And, she's dear to me, just like all of your relatives are dear to you. So I totally understand that. One thing that I always talk with Peter about, and the last thing that he usually says is, it's for the students. We're doing it for the students. We're here for the students. So I always have to, go back to that. And then I see the families that, do work and don't have the time. And I have to consider that. And, Chris and I just ran unopposed just this past June, and nobody said, anything. Nobody ran against us, which I thought either, we're doing a good job, or, maybe people don't have the time, or things are just going well. But now, I'm getting emails as of like an hour before this that are just horrible and mean. And none of us are trying to do something to hurt any of your kids. We're just trying to do what's right. And for you, like for some people to say like, who am I to put our children through this, or what is the sick, dead threshold, is just beyond me, because I'm not trying to hurt your children or you guys. I'm just trying to do what I was asked to do from the state. And they said to go by your local numbers. And I've called Desi and left a message and said, how can you do this to us? I always want local control. I think that town should definitely have local control, but maybe not for something like this. And it bothers me that some of you, this is where I live. I'm not moving from Abington. So some of you that may hold grudges against us because we didn't vote a certain way, is hurtful to think that that might happen. And all the people that, have been emailing us and giving us encouragement and saying thank you, and you don't envy our position, or, I think we all received a really nice, kind letter the other day with a little gift to Cream. And, something like that just like keeps you going, and it makes you think that you're doing the right thing. So basically, I just want to say, whatever happens, nobody's going to be happy. We all know that. I've still, up until an hour before this, tried to come up with another solution. Can some of us go to school that want to go to school? Can some of us stay home and our most vulnerable teachers teach those students? I'm told like that there's just not a logical, logistical way around some of the things that I brought up. So, it's confusing and it's sad. And I just want to say that, we all want what's best for your kids, and for our teachers and for the town. So this isn't an easy decision. And I want you to all know how wholeheartedly we are taking this. And thanks for all you do, everybody. That's all I have to say. So on that note, would anyone like to make a recommendation for what Peter suggested as to a hybrid 2-3 model?
I'll make a motion to go with the hybrid 2-3 model.
Okay, Danielle.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chris,
He's muted.
can you unmute Chris, please?
I said aye.
Aye. Okay. So that, I think, is a,
So
does Jackie and I say our vote, or do we just go with?
I think you take a full vote. I know you have 3, which is a majority, but I think you get a full. So if the other members are opposed to that, they would say no.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Jackie?
No.
No, I'm going to say no as well. So that leaves us with a 3-2 vote in favor of hybrid.
Of the 2-3 hybrid.
Yes, model.
So
Excuse me.
That's
Thank you.
what we'll submit.
Peter, can that one off day, does it have to be Wednesday? Is that still up for?
It doesn't have to be. The thinking behind that being the day in between is because a couple of reasons. It gives the chance in the middle of the week to clean everything before the next cohort comes in.
Yeah.
And then it also provides the opportunity for the professional development and then some synchronous office hours time with kids at the middle of the week in terms of that break point between the shifting of the cohorts.
We need to look at Monday holidays at some point, though, probably.
Yes. And there's if there are tweaks to this that would improve it, we'll make those. If you all know, we've got to work through the details of this plan. There are challenges with this plan. People work hard to make it work. We still don't know how we're going to return on September 16th. There are other factors that we've talked about tonight in the wind, not the least of which is the trajectory of this virus. And I started my comments tonight, and I won't repeat them because we've all had a long night, and this is the 3rd of long nights for everybody, plus all of the work people have done behind the scenes on this. It's in Massachusetts, the local control piece, and Wendy touched on this. I'm just sorry to the entire group of people here that we've had to endure this to this point. We're one day closer to the virus being over, and no matter what happens, we're going to work hard for kids.
Peter, can you talk about the next steps? So this is what you submit, and then negotiations will continue with the Abington Education Association. But in terms of parents having information about what September will actually look like, when do you think that could potentially happen?
That is all this group of people is going to do for the next couple weeks, and just as soon as we can. And I wish that I could be clearer on that. I have the title of tomorrow's meeting with the administrative team is called "What's Next," and we're gonna. Until tonight, we didn't know. At least we have a direction to work in. I appreciate that. ASAP is the answer.
So should we plan for another meeting where the community gets the final update after negotiations are complete? Is that something we plan for? We just wait and see?
So we'll need a meeting to approve the full committee. So right now, you know that members Jackie Abrams and Wendy Happel are on the subcommittee for the negotiations. And then we have to the association will bring a tentatively agreed upon plan to its members. And then the subcommittee will bring a tentatively agreed upon plan to the school committee. And then we can have as many meetings as the committee wishes along the way for updates. And then after that, then we would roll out the details of the plan. However, at this point, I can at least inform the community of the direction we're moving in. But the specifics, shouldn't come out until the finer details wouldn't come out until there's an agreement.
But both parties know that an agreement has to be ideally finished prior to well, we now just voted for September 16th to be the return to school. So somewhere between now and then, we would come back together.
That's the plan, absolutely. And you, I mean, tomorrow you're in negotiations with Wendy, so we're not wasting any time.
Okay.
Okay, so at this moment, we're not going to set a date for our next meeting. We do have negotiations with the AEA, as Peter said. We have 3 additional meetings set, and then I'm sure more will be coming down the line. So does anybody else have anything to add or say? I kind of feel a little relieved. I don't, even though the vote didn't go my way, I feel there's a little bit of pressure off to go on to the next day, and let's just make this work. Let's just do the best that we can. And I know we can, between the teachers and staff and school committee and parents, and we're just going to do what we can to make this work, and then see what happens. And all of this could be for naught, because the teachers union or the DESE could come up next week and say, yeah, we're going to go a different direction. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Peter, I guess I want to say my approval of the motion is based on August 4th information. With school not starting for 6 weeks now, a lot can still change.
Hopefully it changes in the right direction.
Agreed?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of a dumb thing to say, right?
It's okay.
So on that note, everyone, I hope you have a wonderful night. Parents, everyone at home, thank you for tuning in.
Do we still
We
need
have
to
more on our agenda.
approve the mid
we have more on the agenda. What else can we go through tonight? I need
reading approval
I
of
need a
minutes.
nap. What else do we have? Tell me.
Reading approval of the minutes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm out of here. That's how I feel. So would anyone like to go through the minutes that we have for the July 21st, 2020 meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Excellent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. And can we also read and approve the July 13th, 2020 minutes?
That feels like it was forever ago.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for July 13th.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. And then I think that is it.
Just a motion, if the committee is ready, then a motion to just adjourn.
Yep. So I'll make the motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.